You know how some family stories get told so many times that you start to wonder if your own memories are even real anymore? I used to brush that feeling off as me being too sensitive or too quick to hold on to the past. But there comes a point when the little inconsistencies stop feeling like accidents and start feeling like a deliberate rewriting of your life. That is where I found myself not long ago, sitting in my small apartment in Sacramento, California, trying to decide whether keeping the peace was worth losing myself. My name is Jessica Reynolds, and I am 33 years old. I work as a guidance counselor at a public high school here in Sacramento, the kind of job where you spend your days helping teenagers figure out who they are while quietly wondering if you ever really figured it out yourself. My apartment is nothing special, just a modest one-bedroom place near the river, with creaky floors, an afternoon light that hits the kitchen table in a way that always makes me pause. It is mine, though. I pay the rent with my own paycheck. I choose the groceries, and I decide when the lights go out. For a long time, that felt like enough. Then one ordinary afternoon changed everything. It began with a phone call from my father while I was still at school, grading papers in my empty classroom after the final bell. His voice came through the line calm and measured the way it always sounded when he was about to ask for something that would cost me more than I wanted to give. "Jessica, Helen, and I need you to come by the house this weekend," he said. No. Hello, no. How are you? Just the request delivered, like it was already decided. "There are some family matters we should handle together. You have been hard to reach lately, and Helen is worried you are pulling away from us again." I felt that familiar tightening in my chest, the one that showed up every time he used the word us, like a lock. My stepmother Helen had been part of our lives since I was 12 after my biological mother passed. My father never talked much about those years, and Helen filled the silence with her own version of events. She always said my mother had been too sick to want visitors, that it was kinder to keep me away, so I would remember her the way she was before. I had believed it because I was a child, and because my father backed her up every time I asked questions. "I have plans this weekend," I said quietly, my pen frozen over a student's essay. "Maybe we can talk on the phone instead." There was a short pause, then my father's voice shifted softer but heavier. "Plans with who? That friend of yours again? Jessica, family comes first. We raised you. We were there when things got hard. Helen has been like a mother to you. The least you can do is show up when we ask." The words landed exactly where he knew they would. I could already feel the old guilt rising, the same guilt that had kept me driving across town for Sunday dinners I did not want, and listening to conversations that made me feel 12 years old again. I told him I would think about it, and ended the call as gently as I could. My hands were shaking when I set the phone down. That night, I could not sleep. I kept replaying the conversation, the way my stepmother's name had been used like a shield and a weapon at the same time. Something about the way he said Helen is worried felt off, like there was more he was not saying. For weeks, she had been making little comments during our rare phone calls, things like, "Your mother never asked for you at the end, you know. It would have been too upsetting for everyone." Each time I had swallowed the words and changed the subject because arguing felt pointless. But lying in the dark that night, I realized I no longer knew which parts of my own story were true. The next morning, I called in a personal day at work. I drove to the main hospital in Sacramento, the same one where my biological mother had spent her final weeks more than 20 years earlier. I had never requested the records before. It had always felt too painful, and my father and stepmother had always discouraged it. "Why dig up old pain?" my stepmother would say whenever the topic came close. "She is gone. We are your family now." I filled out the medical records request form at the front desk, my handwriting a little uneven. The clerk, a kind woman in her 50s, told me it could take a few days to locate the older files and that I might need to come back or have them mailed. I thanked her and turned to leave, already second-guessing the whole thing. My phone rang before I reached the parking garage. It was my father again. "Where are you right now?" He asked, no warmth in the question. I hesitated. "I had an errand." "At the hospital." His voice sharpened. "Helen just got a call from someone who saw you there. What are you doing, Jessica?" This is exactly the kind of thing we were trying to avoid. You are upsetting people who do not need to be upset. I stopped walking. The fluorescent lights overhead suddenly felt too bright. "I was just requesting some old records. It is nothing that concerns you." "It concerns all of us," he said. "Helen is beside herself. She has spent years protecting you from the worst of it. And now, you are going behind our backs. Do you have any idea how that looks? How it makes her feel after everything she has done for you?" My throat tightened. I could picture my stepmother in their living room, probably already on the phone with someone else, framing the story, so I came out looking unstable or ungrateful. The same pattern that had played out for years whenever I tried to set even the smallest boundary. "I need to understand what happened back." Then I said, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be, "I have a right to my own mother's records." "You have a right to the family we gave you," my father replied. "That should be enough. If you keep pushing this, you are going to regret it. Some things are better left alone. Helen and I have been more than patient with you." He hung up before I could answer. I stood there in the parking garage for a long time, the concrete walls pressing in the sound of distant car doors, echoing like accusations. For the first time in years, I let myself cry in public, quiet tears that I wiped away quickly, so no one would ask if I was okay. When I got back to my apartment, I called my best friend, Christina. She had known me since college and had watched the slow erosion of my confidence every time I came back from a visit with my father and stepmother. I told her what had happened at the hospital and how my father had found out so fast. "Jess, that is not normal," Christina said gently. "They are tracking you now. That is not love. That is control." I wanted to argue, to say they were just worried, but the words would not come. Instead, I heard myself say, "I think I need to keep going. I need to see what is actually in those files." Christina was quiet for a moment. "Then do it. And if it gets ugly, you do not have to handle it alone. I am here." After we hung up, I sat on my couch with the lights off, staring at the dark screen of my phone. My father had not called back. My stepmother had not texted. The silence felt heavier than any argument. I knew they were waiting for me to apologize, to promise I would drop it and come to dinner like nothing had happened. Part of me still wanted to, the part that had spent 20 years trying to be the daughter they could approve of. But another part, the one that had driven to the hospital that morning, was already moving. I opened my laptop and searched for an old neighbor from the house we lived in when my biological mother was sick. His name was Brian Torres. He had been kind to me, back then always waving when I rode my bike past his yard. I had not spoken to him in years, but I remembered he used to work in home security systems. If anyone might still have access to old footage from that time, it could be him. I typed out a short message and hit send before I could talk myself out of it. Then I turned off the laptop and sat in the quiet, feeling the weight of what I had just started. For the first time, I was not asking their permission to remember my own life. I was simply choosing to look. The choice felt both terrifying and strangely light. I did not know yet what the hospital files would show or what old recordings might still exist. I only knew that the version of the story my father and stepmother had protected so fiercely was no longer enough to keep me from asking questions, and for the first time in a very long time, that felt like the beginning of something that belonged only to me. The next morning, I woke up to a short reply from Brian Torres. He said he still lived in the same neighborhood and remembered me as a quiet kid on my bike. He did not ask many questions, just offered to meet me at a coffee shop near the old house if I wanted to talk about whatever I was looking for. I stared at the message for a long time before typing back that I would come by after work. Something about his calm, no-pressure answer made the knot in my stomach loosen just a little. I spent the morning at school trying to focus on my students, but my mind kept drifting to the hospital. Around lunchtime, I drove back to the records office. The same clerk from the day before was there, and she introduced herself properly, this time as Amanda Price. She was in her late 40s with kind eyes and the sort of steady voice that made you feel like you were not the first person to show up looking for answers that might hurt. Some of the older files are still being located, Amanda said gently after checking her screen, but I was able to pull the admission notes and a few progress reports from your mother's final stay. Would you like to look at them here, or would you prefer I make copies for you to take? I chose to look right there. My hands felt cold as she handed me the thin stack of papers. I sat at a small table in the corner of the waiting area and started reading. Most of it was medical language I did not fully understand, but one line on the second page stopped me cold. It was dated 3 days before my mother died. In the nurse's notes, it said she had asked repeatedly for her daughter and wondered why visits had stopped. Someone had written family decision, no visitors per husband's request underneath. I read the sentence 3 times. My father had always told me my mother was too weak for visitors. My stepmother had said it would have been too hard on everyone, especially me. Yet here it was, in black and white, my mother had wanted to see me. She had asked. My chest felt tight. I folded the papers carefully and thanked Amanda, telling her I would come back for the rest when they were ready. She gave me her direct number and said to call if I needed help navigating any of it. I could tell she sensed this was not a casual request, but she did not pry. I drove home with the papers on the passenger seat, like they might disappear if I looked away. By the time I reached my apartment, the phone was already ringing. It was my father again. His voice was quieter this time, almost tired. Helen told me you went back to the hospital, he said. Jessica, you are making this harder than it needs to be. Whatever you think you are going to find, it will not change what happened. Your mother was very sick. We did what we thought was best for you. I sat on the edge of my couch, still holding the folded papers. She asked for me, I said. My voice sounded small even to me. The notes say, she asked why I stopped coming. There was a long silence on the other end. When my father spoke again, the tiredness had been replaced by something sharper. Those records are old and incomplete, he said. You cannot trust everything written down by strangers who did not know our family. Helen has been beside herself since yesterday. She has spent years trying to protect you from unnecessary pain, and this is how you repay her. Your brother Andrew called me this morning worried about you. He thinks you are digging up things that will only hurt everyone. The mention of my older brother landed like another weight. Andrew lived 2 states away and rarely got involved, but my father knew exactly how to use him as proof that I was the one causing problems. I am not trying to hurt anyone. I said, though the words felt thin, I just want to know what actually happened. What happened is that we became your family when your mother could not be there, my father replied. Helen stepped in and raised you like her own. If you keep questioning that you are going to lose the only people who have ever been consistent in your life, think carefully before you do anything else. He ended the call home without waiting for an answer. I sat there with the phone in my lap, the hospital papers still on the table in front of me. The quiet in my apartment felt different. Now, heavier, I could already feel the distance growing between us, the way it always did when I pushed back, even a little. This time, it felt more final. I called Christina after dinner. She listened without interrupting, while I told her about the notes and the phone call. When I finished, she let out a slow breath. "Jess, that is not protecting you," she said. "That is controlling the story, so you never get to have your own. You do not owe them your silence, just because they raised you. You know that, right?" I did know it somewhere deep down, but knowing it and feeling brave enough to act on it were two different things. I told her I was meeting Brian the next day to see if any old security footage still existed from around that time. Christina offered to come with me, but I said I needed to do this part alone. She understood. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the nurse's note again. My mother had asked for me. She had wanted me there. And someone, probably my father at my stepmother's urging, had decided I should not go. The betrayal sat in my stomach like something I had swallowed years ago and never digested. The next afternoon, I met Brian at a small coffee shop a few blocks from the old neighborhood. He looked older with more gray in his hair, but his smile was the same kind one I remembered from childhood. We sat outside at a metal table. I told him I was trying to piece together some things from when my mother was sick, and asked if he still had any old security system footage or recordings from the houses on the street. Brian nodded slowly. I installed most of the cameras back then for the neighborhood watch group. A lot of the old files got deleted over the years, but I kept a few external hard drives in my garage when I upgraded my own system. There might be something from the weeks before your mom passed. I can check tonight if you want. I thanked him and gave him my number. He did not ask why I needed it or try to talk me out of looking. He just said he would text me if he found anything. As I drove home, the sun was starting to set over Sacramento, turning the river gold. My phone buzzed with a text from my stepmother. It was the first direct message I had received from her since the hospital visits started. "Jessica, your father is very upset. Please think about what you are doing to this family. We have always tried to do right by you. Some doors are better left closed. Call me if you want to talk." I read it twice. The words were soft on the surface, but underneath, I could feel the warning. They were closing ranks. The pressure was no longer just about coming to dinner. It was about choosing which version of the past I was willing to live with. When I got back to my apartment, I spread the hospital notes out on my kitchen table again. I kept coming back to that one line about my mother asking for me. For years, I had carried the story that she had not wanted visitors, that staying away was the loving thing to do. Now that story had a crack in it, and I could feel everything I had built on top of it starting to shift. I did not call my father back. I did not text my stepmother. Instead, I sat at the table with the papers and let myself feel the full weight of what I was choosing. It was not dramatic or loud. It was just quiet and heavy, like standing at the edge of something I could not see the bottom of yet. Brian texted late that evening. He had found a short clip from one of the old driveway cameras at our former house. It was from the week before my mother died. He said the quality was poor, but I could come by his place the next day if I wanted to see it. I told him I would be there after school. I turned off the lights and lay on the couch in the dark, listening to the distant traffic on the freeway. My father had not called again. My stepmother's texts sat unanswered on my phone. The silence they were giving me now felt like the beginning of the punishment for asking questions they did not want answered. I knew that if I kept going, I might lose what little connection I still had with them. The thought hurt in a deep, familiar place I had spent years trying to protect. But the hospital note was still on the table, and tomorrow there would be a video clip to watch. For the first time, the fear of what I might find felt smaller than the fear of never knowing the truth at all. The next day after school, I drove to Brian Torres's house on the edge of the old neighborhood. He met me in his garage where an old desktop computer sat on a workbench, surrounded by neatly labeled boxes. He did not ask why I needed to see the footage. He just pulled up a folder, clicked on a file, labeled with a date from more than 20 years ago, and turned the screen toward me. The video was grainy and the audio was thin, but it was clear enough. The camera had been mounted on the garage facing the driveway of the house I grew up in. My father and stepmother stood near the open car door. My stepmother's voice came through, first sharp and low. "Don't bring her here today," she said. "Elena is asking for her again, and it is only going to make everything harder. Jessica is better off remembering her mother the way she was before. We can tell her it was the doctor's decision." My father rubbed the back of his neck the way he always did when he was uncomfortable. "She keeps asking about her," he said. "What if she finds out later?" My stepmother stepped closer to him. "She will not find out if we are consistent. We are her family now. The sooner she stops hoping for something that is not going to happen, the better it will be for all of us." The clip ended there. I sat very still on the metal stool Brian had offered me. My hands were folded in my lap. So tightly my knuckles had gone white. I had spent most of my life believing my mother had not wanted to see me at the end. That story had shaped how I moved through the world, how I accepted my stepmother's place in our family, how I swallowed every quiet dismissal and every guilt-laden phone call. The lie had been this deliberate. My father had chosen it. My stepmother had protected it. Brian cleared his throat softly. "I can burn a copy to a drive for you, if you want," he said. I nodded because I could not find my voice yet. I drove home with the small USB drive in my purse like it weighed more than it should. The hospital notes were already on my kitchen table. Now the footage sat beside them. Together they told a story my father and stepmother had spent decades making sure I would never hear. That evening I called them. I asked if I could come over. My father sounded surprised, but agreed. When I arrived, my stepmother opened the door. She looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe I was finally seeing her without the old filter of needing her approval. We sat in the living room. I placed the printed hospital notes and the USB drive on the coffee table between us. My father picked up the papers first. His face changed as he read. My stepmother did not touch anything. She kept her hands folded in her lap, the same way I had at Brian's. "I found the records," I said. My voice was steady even though my chest felt like it was caving in. "And there is a video from the old driveway camera. You told the doctors and everyone else that she did not want visitors. You decided I should not see her." My father set the papers down. He looked at my stepmother, then at me. "It was a long time ago," he said. "We were trying to protect you from what I asked, from saying goodbye to my mother, from knowing she wanted me there." My stepmother's eyes filled with tears, but her voice stayed controlled. "You were a child. You would not have understood how hard it was. We gave you a stable home. We gave you everything after she was gone. Is this how you thank us, by digging through old files and accusing us of lying?" The words landed exactly as they always had, designed to make me feel selfish for wanting the truth. This time, they did not land the same way. "I am not accusing you," I said quietly. "I am telling you what I found. And I am telling you, I cannot keep pretending the story you gave me is the only one that matters." My father leaned forward. His voice dropped into the tone he used when he wanted something to be final. "Jessica, if you walk out of here tonight holding on to this, you are choosing to cut yourself off from the only family you have left. Your brother already thinks you are being unreasonable. Helen has been nothing but a mother to you. You are going to regret throwing that away over some old notes in a blurry video." I felt the tears come then, hot and quiet. I let them fall. I already regret the years I spent believing I was not wanted, I said. I regret every time I made myself smaller so you would not be uncomfortable. I am not going to do that anymore. My stepmother stood up. Her hands were shaking. You have always been dramatic, she said. Even as a little girl, you made everything about your feelings. We tried so hard with you. And now, you are punishing us for trying to give you a normal life. I looked at her for a long moment. The woman who had raised me, who had cooked my meals and signed my report cards and told me my mother had not asked for me. The betrayal sat between us like something alive. I am not punishing you, I said. I am choosing not to live inside the lie anymore. If that means we do not see each other, then that is what it means. I will not come to dinners where we all pretend everything is fine. I will not answer calls that make me feel 12 years old again. I need space to figure out who I am without carrying the version of me you needed me to be. My father did not stand. He stayed in his chair, looking older than I had ever seen him. You are making a mistake, he said. But there was no real force behind it anymore. It sounded like something he was supposed to say. I picked up the papers in the drive and put them back in my bag. Maybe, I said, but it is my mistake to make. I walked to the door. My stepmother did not follow me. My father did not call me back. The house was quiet behind me as I stepped outside into the evening air of Sacramento. I drove home with the windows down, letting the cool night air fill the car. I did not cry again until I was back in my own apartment, sitting on the floor with my back against the couch. The next few weeks moved slowly. I blocked their numbers for a while, then unblocked them and set the calls to go straight to voicemail. I told Christina what had happened. She came over with takeout and sat with me while I said out loud for the first time that I might never have a real relationship with my father or stepmother again. She did not try to fix it. She just listened. I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Rachel Kim twice a month. At first, I mostly cried through the sessions. Later, I began to talk about what it felt like to have spent so many years trying to earn a place in a family that had decided long ago what my place would be. My principal at school, Mrs. Delgado, noticed I was quieter than usual and gave me extra space with my schedule without asking questions. I was grateful for the small kindnesses from people who had no obligation to offer them. There was no dramatic confrontation after that night, no big apology, or sudden change of heart from my father or stepmother. They sent one text a few weeks later, asking if I was done being difficult. I did not answer it. The silence that followed felt like the final confirmation that the relationship I had been trying to preserve had never really existed in the way I needed it to. Some evenings, I still felt the old ache, the one that whispered I had thrown away the only people who knew my whole history. On those nights, I would sit at my kitchen table with the hospital notes and the USB drive and remind myself that knowing the truth did not make the loss any smaller. It only made the loss honest. I kept going to work. I kept showing up for my students. I started taking walks along the river after school, letting the sound of the water replace the sound of my father's voice, telling me I was being unreasonable. The loneliness was real, but it was a different kind of loneliness than the one I had carried while trying to stay connected to people who needed me to stay small. One night, months later, I sat on my couch with the lights low and thought about the version of me who had driven to the hospital that first day, hands shaking, terrified of what she might find. She had been braver than I gave her credit for at the time. She had chosen to look even when looking meant the possibility of losing everything she had called family. I still do not have the kind of ending where everyone understands and the relationships are repaired. I do not have weekly phone calls or holiday dinners. What I have instead is a quieter life, that belongs to me. I get to decide what stories I carry forward and which ones I set down. That choice still feels heavy some days. On other days, it feels like the first real breath I have taken in years. If you have ever had to choose between the comfort of a familiar lie and the uncertainty of your own truth, I hope you know you are not selfish for wanting to know what actually happened. I hope you know that protecting your own peace is not the same as destroying a family. Sometimes the family you were given cannot hold the truth you need to live inside. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let it go anyway. Thank you for listening to my story. If this story stayed with you, I would love to hear where you are watching from and what line you would draw with your own family. What would it take for you to choose yourself, even when it means standing alone